everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Cassandra Etienne. I'm Assistant Director at the Center for Cooperative Media. And welcome to this afternoon's panel on drug decriminalization and New Jersey's growing cannabis industry. Recreational marijuana was legalized in New Jersey since 2020, and the market officially opened last April. And since then, the cannabis industry has posted upwards of 177 million between July and September of last year, and in that same time frame has generated $8 million in tax revenue for the state. So we know that the cannabis industry is profitable for the state of New Jersey, but as the state reaps the profits, how is it being held accountable in terms of promises made towards restitution for Black and Brown people, Black and Brown communities in particular, who are disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs? And also, how is New Jersey at the state and local level moving to create more fair opportunities for small businesses, some owned by people of color, and helping these businesses to kind of find footing in this growing industry? Today, we're happy to welcome our host, Jelani Gibson of New Jersey Cannabis Insider for NJ.com, and our wonderful panel, Joshua Al, founder of Cannabis, Manuel Caban, president of Loud House LLC, and Shirali Patel, founder of Blaze Law Firm. And between them, this wonderful panel has a wealth of information to share about the science of cannabis and cannabinoids, education in cannabis and the new market, entrepreneurial experience, policy and advocacy work around licensing and regulation, just to name a few areas of expertise. So we're so excited that they're able to join us this afternoon. Today's event is part of the Not Your Same Old Sources series. It features experts from the Diverse Sources database, which is an open, publicly available database with experts that reflect the various communities in our state. And it's an effort to help encourage reporters to become more inclusive in their reporting and in their sourcing for their stories. This panel is presented by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University in partnership with NJ.com, New Jersey Ethnic and Community Media, and our event sponsor, the Office of Communications at Princeton University. Thanks everyone for showing up for this. I'll turn it over now to Joe with some brief reminders to help ensure that this event runs as smoothly as possible. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, you know the drill by now. We're on Zoom meetings here, so I just want to draw your attention here to a few features to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. Number one, we know our mute and unmute and turn on and turn off video buttons in the bottom left. You may have to shake your mouse a little bit for those to appear. Try to stay muted when you're not speaking or if you're not being called on. We will have an audience Q&A portion at the end of this, so hold tight. But if you have questions or comments that you'd like to post in the chat, you can do so in the chat in the bottom right corner. If you don't see that on your screen, you can click the little chat bubble icon towards the middle of your Zoom screen right next to the share screen button. That should pop up a window, and then just make sure that the little blue button there that says to everyone, make sure that that is indicating the correct person that you'd like to be speaking to. Sometimes you're in a DM or you're direct messaging somebody and you want to post something to the whole group and you post it just to that person or one of the hosts. So just keep an eye on that. If you do have any issues or technical problems, or you just need us to maybe slow down or something, just send a DM. You can click that everyone button and change it to either myself or our host, Jelani Gibson, who you'll meet in just a second. There's other ways for you to react or show your approval or disapproval. You can click the reactions button at the bottom and you can pop up a little clapping emoji or one of the other ones there that you have available. I think that's pretty much it. And I will then turn it over to our host, Jelani, and our wonderful panelists. Jelani, if you go ahead and unmute and then introduce yourself and our panelists.
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yep, all right. You're all good.
All right, good. Yeah, I was helping our final panelists get logged on here. So
always appreciate the assist there. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. So glad to see all of our panelists in attendance. My name is Jelani Gibson, and I am a cannabis reporter for the NJ Cannabis Insider, which is a cannabis newsletter that's a part of NJ.com. The partnership that we have with the Center for Cooperative Media is also a part of NJ Advanced Media's Diversity Committee, and part of our initiatives to also better engage with communities of color and also engage in community education. We also have Shirali, who's here. She will also be present at one of our events in March. And we also have Josh Alb here, who is also one of our social equity partners who does events as well. And so with that, I will also be dropping some links into the chat for people that are interested in coming to NJ.com's event in March. And with that, I will go ahead and turn everything over to, let's start with Shirali introducing herself, and then let's go ahead and start with Josh. And let's go ahead and after that, go with Manuel.
Thanks, Jelani. Thank you, everybody that's tuning in. My name is Shirali Patel, born and raised in New Jersey. I'm an attorney in the cannabis industry, as well as an educator and an advocate. I started really organically about 2016, just went to legalized states, started gathering as much information, networking, came back and, really just brought that information back to the East Coast. And then I connected with Amol Sinha, who's the executive director of the ACLU and was part of the 2020 NJ Can coalition that legalized adult use, getting it on the ballot. My main role was really the South Asian liaison, because a lot of individuals in my community, not only do they not vote, they weren't even aware that this initiative was on the ballot. So I really was focused on educating that community specifically. And since then, I went on to work at multiple different law firms where I built up their cannabis practice area. And then about a year ago, I left and I launched my own law firm, Blaze Law Firm, where I represent all types of license holders. And I built in social equity from day one. So I work with select 4 current pro bono social equity clients. And I've helped, I would say, over hundreds of thousands of free legal work in the community. And I also do free expungement clinics and things of that nature, educational programs. And as somebody, as a woman of color, I've seen how difficult it is in this industry to get in, whether it's getting access to capital, getting local support, getting banking. And so throughout my years of experiences, I decided to share a lot of that content through a free platform and a resource called Blaze Responsibly, which is also my company. And so I'm really here to just help share, dispel a lot of the misinformation that happens in this industry. And, bring my background. Prior to cannabis, I worked in government. So I was a county council, worked in Bergen County, Passaic County, City of Newark, the City of Hoboken. And I also did multi-district litigation. So if anybody's familiar with the ongoing national opioids lawsuit, I lost a friend to an overdose, and I used my degree to be able to be part of that litigation plaintiff side. So I have experience in working against the pharmaceutical industry, which is actively trying to take over the cannabis industry, for lack of better words. And so that's just a little bit about me and the work that I do. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
All right, you're up, Josh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Alb. I am a biochemist in the space, longtime operator, I guess. I've been in the space about 10 years now, over 10 years in the legacy market, just about for almost 15 years. I've created a number of different programs out of Cannabis, which is the company I founded that is really the center point for community and education here in the state of New Jersey. We work with colleges, universities, and governments across the state, as well as the New York and Pennsylvania region, to help provide free educational programming for communities, to provide them with resources they need to become operational, free expungement clinics, career centers, or we'll help build your resumes, haircuts, headshots, do on-site interviews for jobs. Really have been a long-time advocate in ending the war on drugs, and have specialized in on the pharmaceutical end of things, or the cannabis pharmaceutical end of things, with manufacturing cannabinoid ligands to treat various conditions, as well as being able to provide novel work towards the removal of pharmaceutical usage and replacement for cannabinoid and cannabinoid therapies. We have a couple different programs that I've been a part of. We manage the only NIH-funded research facility here in the state of New Jersey, and have recently created my own cannabis biochemical research program out of Middlesex College. We've been fortunate enough to open it up to the public to look to bring in researchers from other schools, students primarily, to start creating more cannabis scientists like myself. Aside from that, I have a couple licenses for cultivation and manufacturing here in the state. We look to become operational this year. I'm one of the only minority manufacturers, I suppose, that we know of. So like, you know, in terms of our full scale operation and to represent the Latino side of things as someone who suffered from the war on drugs and has been arrested for possession of cannabis, and, you know, there was a whole number of other false charges that were thrown in there. You know, it's something that has been very dear to me with, you know, seeing reparations in its truest form with Cannabis. And I'm proud to be here today with, you know, my brother Jelani, who, you know, has been a real advocate for everything that we've done here. So thank you for having me. And thank you, Montclair State, as well as the Cooperative Center.
All right, you're up, Manuel.
How y'all doing today? Hi, I'm Manuel Caban. I'm a small business owner to Manny Manai Catering. I'm also co-owner to Loud House LLC, soon to be dispensary in Camden, New Jersey. I'm also one of the early founders to a baseball league called North Camden Baseball. I also perform a lot of community service, from feeding the homeless and to keeping our neighborhood and parks clean. And I'm appreciated the opportunity to, you know, be here also.
All right, and so we're going to start with some open questions that all of you can answer, but you'll definitely have certain expertises and experiences on. And so one thing that we oftentimes talk about in the cannabis industry is education, right? And a lot of you are definitely in different spots where you may have to do a certain type of education for the positions that you're in as a manufacturer, as a dispensary, as an attorney. So how about we start with, you know, you, Josh, about the type of education that you find yourself educating communities on, and then we'll kick it to Shirali and then Manuel.
So, you know, actually, when I started in this space, I started in the Prop 215 market in California. Like, I'm born and raised in Jersey, but, you know, dipped at basically graduated high school and then dipped to the West Coast for a couple years, where I was running basically a vertical operation, essentially under 215 law, which was allowed under the cooperative clauses that they had. So like the education that I was doing out there at the time was patient education, right? Because even though we had a fully established market of about 20 years, you know, keep in mind that Prop 215 market enacted in 96, you know, being able to go to an established market and see that education is still lacking across the board, right? And that they wanted to trust it to people who really weren't qualified to be teaching education to begin with, right? So all of our products were cannabinoid therapies, as I was part of the first team to synthesize CBN in the United States back in 2015 and put it to market, as well as rebrand the acidic cannabinoids and put them back to market. And as well as my mentor was, and the company I was part of was the first one to produce a CBD medicine to treat epilepsy back in 2007. So everything that we did was really novel cannabinoid work. But it all, you know, when you simplify everything, it comes down to educating about what the plant has from a medical benefit side, because people genuinely didn't know it in a medical market, which is the crazier part, right? What cannabinoids for what conditions, that kind of thing. So that's where I started really with education, and that's how everything came about to be, because of all the products that we were developing and people needing to be educated just on what cannabinoids are in general and how they interact with the endocannabinoid system, which is the system in your body that's responsible for homeostasis, that's found throughout your entire body, that cannabinoids like THC or CBD interact with, right? That then led to doing the research, obviously, in universities, and as well as seeing that, you know, as we're going to establish this emerging industry, we had to start really with education. So that's where I started when I came back home to New Jersey with Cannabis and, you know, the Why Not THC platform, which is where really everything started, was to get that science, literature, and information out there and make it readily available information the public can just view and educate themselves on, to disseminate misinformation. And it grew very quickly into other things that we need to do, such as workforce development and those kinds of programs with some of our other colleges that we're working with, as well as just an overall need for just general public education, right? The biggest thing, though, I would say from a manufacturer standpoint is that, you know, processing and tech is an entirely different realm. And, you know, for your retail operation, you can bring people in a little bit easier. You know, for something that is like on the cultivation end or the manufacturing end, the learning curve is a little bit higher, right? So like really looking to target chemistry, biology, those kinds of students that we would look to bring in to our company, for instance. And then again, working with the schools to help reactivate certain programs that they've had, right? Or being able to then get different kinds of people in and really focusing on the, minorities and those who've been affected by the war on drugs primarily to fill these roles. So, it's the education's broad and some of the stuff we do is a little bit more intense on the graduate level, I would say, with the research program we have that's really pharmacokinetic data, being able to analyze interactions within the cannabinoid receptor and, look to analyze the data to be able to provide theoretical results that move into in vivo and in vitro trials in regards to how cannabinoids work, it's specifically in the receptor, what amino acid residues they target, how those targeted residues produce specific effects, and then looking to, use that as a theoretical model for any time we have novel cannabinoids that we discover. So yeah, that's like kind of the range of it. But again, the bigger thing is just general public education.
So my education definitely is more focused on the business side, entrepreneurship, and obviously regulatory compliance. And so through Blaze Responsibly, we post legalization, what I did was I put out just general FAQs, because once we legalized, people weren't sure, like, what are my rights? If I'm a pregnant woman, what are my rights? As an employee, like, what are my rights? And so where can I consume responsibly? So a lot of it was just sharing that type of general basic level information to the public through social media and other platforms. And then I started working with Cookies Social Impact, which is Cookies is a pretty large cannabis company nationally, I would say, or globally, but they also have a social impact arm. And so what we did was we hosted a 2-day free workshop. We had over 200 people that signed up. It was a free program, and it was essentially like a boot camp, walking them through the entire landscape of New Jersey, going through regulations, and then walking through the application process. So what types of licenses were available? How do we apply? And then we took it a step further and we started talking about due diligence, what that means. How do you find investors in the space? How do you create a business plan, create a pitch deck, and really giving them all the tools of the trade that I've learned, because information shouldn't be hoarded. And people can do, you can give them all the tools and the information, but it's up to them to apply it. So we really took that opportunity to just give as much real concrete information, because a lot of the individuals that I work with are coming from legacy. They're not used to complying with the rules. They're not aware of legal jargon. They don't understand how terminology really matters. May, shall, if, can, that changes the entire interpretation of regulations. And so we really focus on that workshop on how do you interpret the law, and why is it important for you to become an advocate? Because cannabis is big business. You're going up against individuals that have hired lobbyists that are spending hundreds and thousands of dollars to get regulations that favor their interest. And if you're unable to advocate for your interests, or even know how to start unifying your voices, it's really difficult to be able to shape these regulations. And so that workshop was really focused on not only what are the opportunities in the industry, but how can you take advantage of the resources that are available and build a community that can support you throughout your goals. And then I had done a project with one of the largest counties, Bergen County, and we did a public health campaign where we created an infographic, and it touched on about 36 different fact points post-legalization. Where can I, buy regulated products? What are the adverse effects? Basic, again, very elementary level information. And so a lot of it's focused on just the general FAQs, because even 2 years post-legalization, maybe we're at year 3 now, a lot of people still don't even know what legalization means. And then this year we launched officially, but it took about 6 to 8 months to create. Rutgers Law School in Newark, we created a non-JD program. So as part of developing the certificate for cannabis law and business, anybody can take it. We had some social equity scholarships where we capped the course, and we just started teaching it January 28th, and it's from January 28th to July 29th. It's an entire certificate program, and we've created modules from regulatory compliance, topics for retailers, topics for cultivators, banking, local government, you name it, to pretty much walk you through the whole step-by-step process of what are the opportunities, how do you comply with these regulations? How do you get banking? And we've paired up with a lot of individuals in the industry to give their expertise. And the most important thing is to create a space for these individuals. Some of them may not even want to have a license. They just want to get into the industry one way or another. And it's all about connections and bringing them together, because we can give all the education, but if they don't have other people who are on this journey along with them, it's really difficult. And so it's a way to not only provide them with networking, education, but also mentorship opportunities. So, and that's through Rutgers. So a lot of the education, like I mentioned, is all tied to really entrepreneurship and general education as far as what is legalization, what are the opportunities.
All right, Manuel, you're up.
Okay. Now educational wise, like the biggest factor for us was just mainly because we coming from legacy. So it's just being 21 years old and up. We haven't really did too much of a lot of things that, you know, Joseph and Ms. Blaze have been doing. So we focus on, you know, keeping this type of, you know, product away from kids and stuff like that. And just, you know, learning some, you know, it's just a lot going on, and just being a part and just having a safe place for people to, you know, use the product.
All right, Josh, it looks like you got a pretty scientific question here.
Yeah, I see.
What is, just for the rest of the audience, what is the level of research being done on cannabis for cancer therapy? Literature says that cannabis has anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory properties.
So I'll speak to the anti-inflammatory side first. Biggest anti-inflammatory cannabinoids, the acidic group. They interact with COX-1, COX-2, and interleukin-10 to be able to assist in the decrease and prevention of inflammation as a whole. And as you know, inflammation is the cause of many major diseases just in general. You know, dysbiosis leading to gut inflammation can cause like psoriasis or irritable bowel syndrome. A number of other properties that'll come up with the peripheral system just from inflammation imbalance, you know, and that leads to a number of other conditions. So acidic cannabinoids are your primary treatment, and you can look up that literature in the medical acids patent from 2006, I believe. You know, and then as far as cancer, like, you have to keep in mind with cannabis research, there is a lot of small work. So it makes it very difficult for like large level researchers, right? When we talk like research, there's levels to everything, right? It depends on what kind of projects you're doing. But for cancer treatment, everyone's looking for really the clinical side of things, right? Which is your in vitro and your in vivo models, and then moving that into preclinical. Moving that into clinical trials, you know, because all of that's preclinical. So a lot of that work has been done to show that cannabis has the potential to, like, you know, treat and reduce cancer, and that literature is there, except it's just not as in depth as we need it to be because of the regulations surrounding cannabis as a whole. You have better luck conducting like high level research outside of the United States. And not even just Israel. I'm talking like China and like Hong Kong, University of Shanghai, University of Hong Kong. They've been really big, and that's where we got even the basis for like the work I do, right? So the work I do is analyzing how cannabinoids are specifically working at a molecular level. So like, say you smoke, right? You have THC into the system. How the hell does it bind to the CB1 receptor? What does that conformation look like? What are then the effects that are produced then from that conformation? How do we then assess what a drug's theoretical effects are, you know, when we put it into this system and this protocol that we have? So like, that's the bigger part of it, and being able to not just target the CB1, but all off-target sites. So we have a real solid base for when we move things into those in vivo and in vitro stages. Right now, the government has recently looked to open it up for more research. But I was fortunate enough to work in one of the only NIH funded facilities for cannabis, but it was for addiction, right? So we had specific models that had, the DAT-CNR2s. They were called, it was mice that are patented. It's the school's only patent, and William Patterson, is these mice that have specific cannabinoid receptors removed from their dopamine neurons in order to test for addiction. And that brings me back to the main point that most of the money for cannabis goes to addiction. We had about, I think Cody put it up recently on his page. He's a pharmacist out of LA. And you have like $1.42 billion that's gone towards cannabis research since like 2006, I believe. And of that, over $1 billion has gone specifically to the NIDA, which is the National Institute of Drug Abuse, specifically looking at addiction studies, right? That's where they really focus everything on. I mean, the NIA, it's Tim Liu, it's all the work he's doing with showing anti-aging properties with cannabis, which is huge. Right, he's amazing. Dr. Gardner is really the chief scientist, and they've been trying to be able to get everything to focus more on the stuff that you want, right? Cancer research, being able to actually show novel effects for treating conditions that haven't been previously or have been previously deemed untreatable, like a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome that Dr. Ethan Rousseau has coined, that we've developed medical treatments for that have worked successfully in the field, but we can't take it clinical yet or make those claims because it hasn't gone clinical yet, right? So, you know, I think that it's on the horizon within the next 5 to 10 years to have more definitive work that's published in papers like Science or papers like Nature. If you see something, anything published in Nature that's the top standard, it means it's gold. Like nothing, there is no going against it. Nature, Science, anything like that, these larger publications that would be able to support the work that would be able to provide us like the knowledge that we already know. So the other thing is keep everything in mind that most of this information can be found in the US Patent Office because they hide everything. So like a lot of pharmaceutical companies have already done this work dating back to the mid 70s, right? And even CBN's first isolation was in 1912, I believe. So like, you know, a lot of this stuff is there. It's hard to find. But again, there is obvious promise that shows that cannabinoids can treat cancer effectively. Which cannabinoids for which type of cancer is a big question as well. And then how exactly those cannabinoids work in those cancer cells and why they work effectively is another part of that question. So yeah, I'll shut up now.
All right. So, and obviously you're still getting more scientific questions that we can get back to. One thing that I want to talk about here is, you know, I want all of you's takes on what do you think is going good when it comes to the promises of social equity and economic justice in the market, and where have you seen some of those roadblocks? And so let's go ahead and start with Manuel, then let's do Shirali and Josh.
Okay, now the biggest roadblock for us would be local government. Like, you know, having the funds to show them that we can be a part of this business. And, you know, we didn't know we needed like $400,000 to $500,000. And I don't even know nobody who has $400,000 to $500,000. So now it's more like, you know, we sell a part of our business and, you know, it could be half of our business for that type of money. And that's like the biggest problem that we having right now is with local government. The CRC, they is helping us, but you know, local government is actually, you know, creating a small problem. But you know, we from the poorest city in the nation, and it's just, you know, we're also micro, so it's a small business. Let me see, we're a small mom and pop shop where, you know, mom and pop shops actually built this country. So that's our biggest issue. It would be that part is getting the proper funding to go to pursue this.
I definitely agree with you, Manuel. The good thing I guess I can lead with is that the CRC in New Jersey is doing the best they can and being really accommodating with respect to social equity individuals, because I know Director Wesley McWhite has a Legacy to Legal group, for example, where you have opportunities to interface with the CRC, get your questions answered. And so the fact that there is this direct line of communication accessible from the regulatory body is tremendous. However, like Manuel just said, the biggest issue is that we created legislation with a goal in mind and no way to get to that goal. It's great to have social equity, you know, get priority status, but when they don't have access to capital, when they have predatory real estate deals and municipalities that are doing back end deals, it's like climbing up a brick wall. I mean, it's nonstop, it's hurdle after hurdle, and it's frustrating, especially for small entrepreneurs, micro businesses, where you can get that conditional license from the state, from the CRC, but then when you have to convert, you have to have site control and you need local support. And these local municipalities, some of them are charging non-refundable application fees of $60,000, which is ridiculous. The state application fee for a conditional and to convert is all of $1,000. So when you have municipalities creating these extortionary practices, for a lack of better words, it is prohibitive, and it does nothing to help anybody. It does, especially not social equity individuals that built this entire industry on their backs. My husband was legacy. That's where I know I was connected to that whole, he was in Newark running around, but his record prevented him from getting a job that he thought he could get. He's since gone on and done something in transportation, which is felon friendly. And he works with a lot of individuals, who have come from the streets, but that level of assistance that was required, which is now being contemplated. So now the New Jersey EDA is saying we're going to come out with this grant program, which we advocated for 2+ years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. Also the technical assistance program that's coming out. It's great, but it's a little too late, because I know too many people that have spent money, their life savings, their energy, and we needed this stuff 2 years ago. So I'm glad that it'll be in place at some time this year to help people moving forward. It's just not enough though.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of what they said. The biggest issue has been, municipal approval, because it's directly tied to real estate. And if you understand real estate in a state like New Jersey, all of that just gets really murky waters. That's what it turns into. The second the zoning laws come out, how those zoning laws are made, right? For certain property owners or whatever, for instance, there's certain towns where there's like a specific zoned area where you can only set up your business, and it's not like on the outskirts of town, and one family owns all the properties. Right? So like you're going to do a lot of situations like this. And the state hasn't, because of home rule, like the state has made things very clear that it's everything separated. So the CRC will approve everyone, which I think is going to be a problem when the EDA starts to give out grant money, because it's like, well, who are you giving the grant money to? Are you going to give it to conditional holders who, if we're being honest, may have no shot in hell to be able to ever open up, and it's a waste of funds? Or are you going to give it to those who have municipal approval and are ready to convert, where the money can actually be used for their operations, So it becomes this big question as to who do we give the money to in terms of giving it to somebody who like has a chance, or someone who we know who's going to become operational immediately. But that money could help them get the municipal approval, right? So there's that argument to be held. So things become pretty confusing and like definitely a little bit different than say how like New York is doing, for example, right? And even still, it's still murky there. But like, I think overall, if, for those people who understood, what was going to happen and understood, just how New Jersey works as a whole, there's certain footings that they'll have. And I think that it's just, it turned into a game of politics. At the end of the day, we want a free market, right? Most people just want a free market, the ability to compete like any other business. The fact that most current cannabis businesses in the traditional market are run out of people's homes, or they have separate warehouses that they'll run things out of, or different kinds of fronts for shops, these things of that nature, where the market exists and will always exist. And we must also keep in mind that the legal market is a fraction of a representation from the legacy and the traditional market. It's the small market, it's the minority market at the end of the day, as far as the state goes with, what they've done, I think I have a little bit different of approach, that the state could have done a lot better in terms of how they did this. They definitely didn't have to necessarily give everything. And this comes down to legislatures at the end of the day, not necessarily the CRC, but again, it's traditional New Jersey, by giving the power to the municipalities and leaving it up for them, because it's the old democratic conventional machine, that whole ordeal. And then even so, like allowing the MSOs free reign, right? Allowing them to be able to open up all these shops, have priority, having the lawsuit in 2019 that affected those medical applicants from getting opened up, and how those people most of them aren't going to be able to open up from those 2019 ATC winners. It's just like the state did a really poor job in execution. Good intentions, I'll say, great intentions, horrible execution. And there's a lot of things that we need to fix, right? So now it's like become this whole thing with being able to have municipalities start to allow it. As we know, 70% of the state has banned cannabis operations. Only 15% of the state actually allows retail operations, right? So there's still a long fight to have to be able to get municipal approval. And the other thing is, we want that to be representative of what the market in the traditional sense looks like, right? Which is black and brown. And when we talking brown, we talking, ese, mi gente, su gente, you know what I mean? Like, that's what we talking about here, right? Because these are the people who've been affected the most by the war on drugs, straight up, And I would love to be able to have the Latinos more included in the conversation as a whole, as I feel the state has not really included us that much. Our biggest representative is Jessica Gonzalez, and quite honestly, that's not enough, right? And I think that meetings like this really do help push that ball forward. And again, that's part of the bigger fight that we need to have here.
And so something that I've heard you mention, Josh, and something that I've also heard Shirali mention is about how New Jersey is essentially a pharmaceutical capital of America, and how that can also affect the way that the cannabis space just doesn't play out here, but how it also plays out for federal legalization potentially down the road, and that there are some complicated conversations and potential risks towards social equity that come with that. So let's start with you, Shirali, and then let's go back to Josh about what both your insights are on that.
So, there are, I believe, Johnson & Johnson, and I can't remember the other, but some of these pharmaceutical companies do have patents for synthetic cannabinoids already, and they've been doing testing. And then when you look at the MSO model, or these multi-state operators, which New Jersey is home ground for some of the largest multi-state operators in these cannabis companies, the reason why, and this is because I've been in the room with some of these individuals, is when they're building out their facilities for 150,000 square feet, and you think that's massive, it is because they're looking for big pharma to acquire them post federal legalization. They're not just doing these facilities because they want to produce biomass to scale. It really is a footprint, and it's also an asset, right? Because these companies, one of their biggest assets is real estate. So I feel not only in New Jersey, but at a national level, the pharmaceutical industry, whether you like it or not, is going to come in. And they are also spending a lot of money opposing federal legalization in the Capitol Hill right now, which is contrary to what you would expect, but that's because the regulations are not in favor for what they want right now with current pending regulations. So MORE Act, SAFE Act doesn't work for pharma. And then you have issues with the agencies that are going to be involved, ATF, FDA, DEA. And so pharmaceutical industry is actively lobbying to oppose, and then simultaneously creating and introducing legislation that will benefit them. But I think that these, they're not, I wouldn't say hostile takeovers, they're going to be mergers and acquisitions are what we're going to see this industry post federal legalization. I don't know if we're going to have much of an impact with these companies right now, but another avenue where I also see that happening is with these testing labs. A lot of the testing labs, the regulations in New Jersey require ISO certification, DEA registry. These pharmaceutical companies already have that. The companies that are doing drug testing, generic or producing generic pills, et cetera, they're already certified to be able to take over in that space. And so it's a little bit scary because you've created this industry where you have so many different entrepreneurs at different levels and scales of their businesses. But on the side of it, you have the massive pharmaceutical industry just waiting for the right time, I believe, to be able to pounce in and really disrupt the supply chain.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Shirali, what is the lobbyist group called that they comprise of? It's like Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Marlboro, Smith and something. They all have, it's like the US Cannabis Re-Education Group or something like that. Like it's some really nice title. It makes it sound like it's friendly and industry friendly, but it's really a whole bunch of monsters that are really behind this, trying to put in legislation that does, again, benefit pharmaceutical companies. So like all of my mentors, when I was in school, they were the ones who developed synthetic ligands that targeted the CB2 receptor primarily in a treatment for obesity. So I worked with several actual cannabis scientists who'd been working for pharmaceutical companies developing synthetic cannabinoids for years. You know, like the way that farmers approaches is different than how a cannabis company's approaches. And even I know that you mentioned the 150,000 square foot facilities. But I'll be honest, if these people actually understood science, they would understand that that's not really like, they'll look at it and maybe they do for like raw flower, but the mass majority, you have to keep in mind, what does the majority of the market look like when we have a stability, right? It's 60-40 split, 60% medical, 40% for the adult use or recreational side of things. Those 40% slices are going to be a lot smaller because it's people with like those dispensary operations, cultivation, all that other stuff. But when you look at the 60%, it's all medical in the sense of pharmaceutical related. That's where the real money is in this space. Like just straight up, I've worked with them. I know where this is going, right? I'm trying, you know, in different aspects to be able to understand the curve a lot better, right? But it's oversight to be able to go in for a lot of these larger like grows for the simple reason that like we can produce cannabinoids at scale in bioreactors. You know, like we don't need, like I don't need a grow. You know, a grow is really for like the what you're smoking or like what I'm smoking on, like right here. You get me? Like that's what the grow is for, you know. But for like when we talk mass medicine and everything else, I'm in like a 400 square foot room. You give me one of these and a whole bunch of containers, and I can pump in a 24/7 3-shift like run, and I can pump out cannabinoids more than 150,000 or 300,000 square foot facility could at any day. So like where the pharmaceutical companies are going and where the science is going is completely different from like the trajectory of the industry as a whole. And the second that we allow them into it, the market will change 100% and it'll be massively disrupted in the sense that, you know what, like who's the biggest, like when you talk about like the monsters or the oligarchy or anything else, the biggest, it's not the Russian oligarchy that's the biggest one in cannabis right now. It's the American one named Monsanto, right? Monsanto and Miracle-Gro, and how are they involved right now? It's through Gavita. What is Gavita? Gavita supplies indoor horticulture equipment, right? And they own the largest East Coast distributors for horticulture equipment called Hawthorne, right? So that's how that chain breaks down. So they're already like, I got rolling papers from them and stuff because like they gave us like, for instance, the big ass air filter that's next to me right here that I use for my living room, right? So like they're more than involved in this space already, and they're just waiting to sink their teeth in further. When it comes to like when we talk about cannabinoids, for instance, and they're for those that are FDA approved, you have to keep in mind it's not the molecule that's FDA approved, it's the manufacturing process to that molecule that makes it approved, right? That was the bigger thing when Epidiolex became federally approved as the Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 substance, is because of the fact that its manufacturing process was FDA approved because they can control that, they could patent that, and that's something that was, you know, that semi-synthetic wet chemistry model. You know, and it's still CBD, but it's synthetically made CBD. And then you also have the side effects that can come from that from L&D conformations, which means that the molecules, they have like fluidity and rigidity in certain aspects. And if they bend slightly one way or another, they touch different amino acid residues. So they have slightly different effects, which is why we see more side effects from the synthetic molecules compared to the naturally derived ones, right? We're not saying it's the entourage effect because that still has a lot of question marks around it, as well as the fact that we have things like competitive inhibition and substrate saturation that would prevent a lot of the theories from, you know, the entourage effect disproven, right? Just even from my own work, if you look at it, like I make 3D models of what the drugs look like when they bind to your system, you know, so you get to see it. But like, again, like there is a huge play that I know that they're going to go into. They've been doing stuff with it. I know that Colgate, a subsidiary, Johnson & Johnson and Colgate were doing stuff with like mouthwash, toothpaste, all this other stuff because my friends were the ones doing the studies. So like we have like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's there, you know, for when they're going to make their play, and then how they're going to do it, why they're going to do it, all control, right? So, you know, if people are smart, you'll, I guess, understand where the market is going. And in the interest of not saying too much, yes.
All right, and so we're going to go ahead and move to the Q&A portion, and we do have a couple of questions in here. And so let's
If
see.
anybody wants to ask their question out loud, just use the little raise hand feature and I'll spotlight you, bring you up here, and you can ask it to our panelists. Otherwise, you can post in the chat and Jelani will read it out loud.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the ones that were in the chat first because we're even backed up on that front. And so a question for Manuel is, as an entrepreneur in New Jersey, how does this compare to other states?
Well, it actually is looking good for us because coming from legacy and actually having a chance to be in this type of business from our state, giving us opportunity. So, and from looking at other states and how, you would have to have a lot of money to be a part of it. You have to be a big company. So I look at it like it's a great opportunity for us small guys to actually become something bigger.
All right, and then this is probably a question that Shirali or Josh can answer. How do you address concerns for parents who believe that their children should not get addicted to cannabis? How do you address those parental concerns? Who wants to take that?
I feel like Josh can probably speak to the science of why it's potentially not addictive compared to other drugs.
Well, yes. I think we can work in tandem here. I think that the first and foremost, people need to understand your endocannabinoid system, specifically like those receptors that are really responsible for psychoactivity, which is CB1, don't even really start to begin to fully develop until you hit puberty, right? So to the age of 12 to 13. So like when we talk about, like we administering medicine myself to children, right? When it's THC based Rick Simpson oil stuff, even though we stayed away from that, there was other, products that we would use that we manufactured in house. They wouldn't experience those effects that you would commonly associate with as a quote unquote high, right? There was really more, again, just for medical benefits and reliefs. As far as the addictive qualities, there is a slight, like if you talk about a preference rate, right? When we look at the most preferred drug and models, right? When you put in like cocaine, alcohol, heroin, all the other things in cannabis is the most preferred, but that doesn't mean it's the addicting leader, right? So that's how they try and confuse the research for people. Well, they'll say that, cannabis has a higher tendency rate than opioids or cocaine or anything. Well, it does because the mice want to enjoy their lives, because they're in cages. And that's why they're going after the weed and not the cocaine that makes them all amped up, right? And like people there's that oversight, that whole miss with that leads to just bad headlines and poor information to the general public, right? Cannabis has been shown to treat addiction, right? The CB2 receptor is the primary receptor responsible for addiction in general. And if you're able, and some of the work we did was looking to target that receptor, hence the DAT-CNR2s out of William Patterson, specifically to treat addiction using cannabinoids and cannabinoid therapies, right? There is a mental addiction that can be associated with it that occurs in less than 10% of users. However, any kind of cannabis addiction, reframe it. It's a THC overload. How do you combat that? Is with CBD. So for people who go through, when they stop smoking and go through post-withdrawal symptoms, we administer CBD, which you can read, done by the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, across like 100 some odd patients. They were using cannabis frequently, using CBD removed their post-withdrawal symptoms, right? So, and again, it's about rebalancing the receptor. That's why we always explain everything as a yin and yang balance. Right? THC will turn the receptor on. It's that yin, where CBD will look to stabilize it, not off, but stabilize it and prevent any other interactions with it. It's that yang. So that's how, when you look to start to play, it becomes a game. To me, it's almost like a game, because I understand like how you plug and play with molecules into different receptors and stuff, and like you can produce different effects to like help people treat conditions, that kind of thing, right? So understanding just how it's coded as a whole, and we have education that we've developed that makes it very simple to understand that. And you can look on like cannademics.com or, whynotthc.com, alblabs.com, and everything's readily available for actually viewing how cannabinoids look like when they bind to the receptor, and then explaining again where the medical benefits are, and, to answer your point, why it's not addictive. So and then, for children in particular, we are unrolling high school education that we've been contracted for that'll be coming out this year, because it's something I've been working on since 2017 with the Democratic Party, specifically to develop education to go into high schools, as a similar model to like driver's ed, where we will be actually teaching, students that are, between the ages of like 14 to 17 type deal, what cannabis is, safe consumption methods, that whole ordeal, because we do have a legal substance now, right? So we treat it similar to alcohol in that education manner. And that's how I suggest you take it at home as well. Treat it exactly like how you would a drink. Okay, this is what it is. This is when you can do it. This is when you can't do it. Right. And by doing that and presenting that information, you will see use decrease and drop as a whole. In every legal state, the second that it gets legalized, teen usage, underage usage plummets. One, because it's harder to get their hands on. And then two is because they don't see it as like cool. It's cool to break the law, man. Like, it's cool to be bad. Like, that's why people also do these things. Like, please keep that in mind, So like the second that we remove that, it's just the normal thing. They'll treat it as just the normal thing.
Josh, just to add, the key is education, like you mentioned, right? Like, that's the main thing. I mean, we're going up against like 60 plus years of mass media propagation against this plant, criminalizing this plant. It's an herb. It's been utilized for tens of thousands of years in a variety of different methods. And so I feel like education is the key. So kudos to you, Josh, for getting that type of programming in. Thank you.
Thank you for what you've done. And, Manuel, you as well for being here today. Was repping the legacy down in Camden. What up,
Thank you. And I definitely need to get in contact with you.
Yeah, man. I'll leave my email available here for everyone. I'll just put it in the chat. If anyone needs to reach me for anything, feel free to reach out. Stay in touch on our website for all of our education events. We will be having several throughout March and April. And if you guys want to come see some really cool science, come out on April 29th. We'll be having our career summit and science fair over at Middlesex College, where we will be debuting the results of the work that my students are doing currently at Middlesex. So, pop out. And also, if you need some dope products, check out alblabs.com. So yes.
I just want to say also, we're going to be sending out a recording and a summary post press event email with contact information for our experts today and our panelists as well. So Jelani, I'll let you keep going, but I just wanted to let everybody know.
Yeah, no problem. And so, do we have any questions for the audience? There's like another science question, in which will obviously go to Josh, but
Josh is smart. Now is the time, folks. If you want to raise your hand or just unmute, we don't have a lot of activity in the chat, so we will get to Kara and Claybell's question, but I just want to give anybody an opportunity to unmute and pop in here and ask a question if they didn't get their issue addressed before we move on. Okay, if not, let's go to the final question, the science question.
All right, so final science question, the science round for you once more, Josh. Is natural cannabis like organic and synthetic not organic? What are the implications of synthetic, and why would someone take a synthetic versus a natural plant? Will this be better for big pharma to monetize? Is synthetic the same? How much is known about what cannabis can and cannot do? If it can do a lot of medicinally, why hasn't that happened?
There's like 5 questions in that one question. So I'm going to ask them, what is aspirin? Like, why are you taking aspirin, for instance, right? Like, where did aspirin come from? Aspirin came from a plant they found in nature, and then they copied it so they could patent it, so they could control it and then monetize it from there. That's why, so even for like something like when we look at like morphine or like any of the desomorphine, like dimorphine, any of these other like kinds of opioids like Percocets, hydrocodone, everything like that, they're morphine derivatives, right? Like there are other types of opioids that have been derived that they then patent, claim usage for, and then push to the public. Why? Control. You can't patent a natural occurring compound. That's illegal, right? Hence why the bigger deal with Epidiolex and its synthetic process was the manufacturing process. That's patentable, right? So like the way, and because of that, then their end product then becomes patentable, and also the slight different conformations, right? So The difference is that while one is a naturally occurring compound and can be found in nature, people can make it in a lab and it'll have slight alterations and be very similar, but it still won't be exactly the same. You know, and this is when we started to see, like, again, it happened in opioids. This is what my professors always taught me. The same thing happened with opioids. When we use regular morphine or like, you know, those like opium derived opioids, you know, just directly from the plant, you actually have less side effects and less negative side effects when you're treating patients compared to, you know, the other types of pharmaceutical opioids that have been made available. So that's another big thing with that. And then that just comes down to American imperialism, why we're in certain countries and exploiting their resources, that whole ordeal. But like that's a bigger thing. But like big pharma is a cartel, you know what I mean? Like, don't think they're not picking up from like these different Asian countries and shipping it over here and repackaging things and all that whole in their nature. Like, it's a whole cartel, man. And then like there's a lot that's known, and the reason you can't do much is because it's Schedule 1. So cannabis being a Schedule 1 substance, meaning all cannabinoids are Schedule 1 substances, and even then the DEA now announcing last week that Delta 8, D8, D9, and THCO, which are synthetically derived cannabinoids from, they're semi-synthetic because you'll take CBD and you can take CBD and add like sulfuric acid to it. You just add like an acid catalyst, but you have to be able to figure out a way to like keep a protecting group on it to like stabilize the molecule itself. Otherwise you wind up with a racemic mixture, but you can make THC directly from adding sulfuric acid to CBD. You just add it and it just goes. It's a one-step reaction, right? So there's different things they've done with that, using UV light to be able to move pi bonds around in that first ring so you can get Delta 8 as well. And that was all legal in this gray legal market for a little bit. That's now illegal again under, you know, the DEA's guidelines, right? So, you know, again, it just comes down to control. That's really what they want to do. They want to control this. They want to monetize it. That's why they have these lobbyist groups. That's why they're, you know, they already have all these patents, you know, and that's why it's important that, you know, we create our own, you know, stronghold within the industry as itself and look to be able to bridge to that next level, because that's where we talk real money though. You know, cannabis, we're talking millions. The second you talk pharmaceuticals, you're talking billions. And then that gets really murky waters, you know, so that to be able to take that next step in the industry is something that's huge, something that's going to be needed, something we've been working on from day one, you know, since 2015. But like they, you know, in terms of where that kind of research is going to go, you know, just stay tuned, follow what we're doing, you know, and we'll be able to show you results hopefully this year.
All right, so I think that's a good place to go ahead and stop our panel, and I'll go ahead and kick it back to Joe.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, Jelani, Josh, Manuel, Shirali. I was locked in. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, you know, and I'm really excited that you all were able to join us and bring not just the social, cultural, and political aspects of it, but the scientific and academic side of it as well. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it. For those who joined late or, you know, maybe missed a bit or two of this, don't worry. We are going to send out this recording in an email as soon as it's done processing up in the cloud by Zoom. We'll also send an auto-generated transcript, which will sync the audio to the transcript so you can search around and use that in your reporting. And then, of course, I'm going to paste this in the chat again, but we've compiled a list of, I think, Cassandra, is it 15 sources? Additional sources that you can use to in your follow-up reporting on this. All of those are drawn from our diverse sources database, which you can find in the link at the chat. We're also going to send that link and others in the follow-up email. So again, thank you so much. Stay tuned and keep a lookout for our next Not Your Same Old Sources event, of course, co-sponsored and presented with the Princeton University Communication Department. Thank you to Cassandra. Thank you to Oni for putting it together. And if you didn't have your questions answered, if you have a follow-up, contact information will be in the email. Thank you all so much. And Josh, I'll be joining you in about an hour. So be easy. I'll see you later, everybody.